Well, we're back again this week wondering whether or not the world is being run by the inmates in an insane asylum. We see that Clinton, this time Hillary, is promoting the idea that we should have normal relationships with Russia. Sanctions will end and that sort of thing. You've been bad boys and you've got to be better boys. But in order to make you better boys, we're going to give you candy. When people behave the way they do, whether it's a child or whether it's an adult, you don't reward them for misbehavior. Well, now it seems we're going to reward Russia, regardless of the past, and with an uncertain future, with a huge amount of candy. And that is going to be trade, the World Trade Organization, and a number of things like that. For instance, in the Democratic platform of this year, it says, "We support establishing permanent normal trade relations with Russia because it would be good for the U.S. economy, for U.S. businesses, and U.S. workers if we do. And securing Russia's accession to the World Trade Organization is an important step towards encouraging Russia to follow a rules-based system and to protecting the rights of American workers, farmers, ranchers, and firms." They always throw that stuff in there. When you know the plan, when you understand the plan, all this is just simply rhetoric. They've always tried to find an excuse to get by all of these trade restrictions and open up Russia to the American market, to where we would go over and invest in Russia. The investments that we've had in Russia have always come back to kill other people. For instance, we built the Ford factory in Russia before World War II. We built another factory called the Kama River factory in southern Russia before they invaded Afghanistan. In fact, wouldn't have had the wherewithal to invade Afghanistan had we not built them the factory. Oh, and then they had such a terrible time getting this equipment across to Afghanistan, so before the war we built them a highway. We actually greased the skids for Russia to roll into Afghanistan and roll across it. That's something that hasn't been talked about since the 1970s. But at any rate, this is the Democratic Party's position that we should open up normal trade relations with Russia. Well, let's look and see what the Republicans have in mind in their platform. Oh, there's some good things in the platform, but you should see things like this that will raise the hair on the back of your head. Russia should be granted permanent normal trade relations. Now, this is after they've gone through a litany of Russia bad boy, Russia bad boy, Russia you shouldn't do this, you killed those, on and on and on and on. But, however, Russia should be granted permanent normal trade relations because we need to influence them to be good boys. It makes you wonder if there's a difference between Party A and Party B. There is. It's the rhetoric. That's it. I will talk about something else in a minute, but one of the problems we have in the John Birch Society is telling the truth. It's not that we don't tell the truth, it's that we do tell the truth. And people don't like it. Before an election, we dare not talk about the Republican candidates because then the Republicans, even our own membership, are up in arms. Oh, you shouldn't say that about us because, you know, this guy is so bad, you've just got to get rid of him. And so after the election, if we don't say anything, everybody comes back and says, why didn't you tell us? You should have told us that this guy was so-and-so, that that individual was his advisor, and on and on and on and on. So we get hit by traffic going both ways, into an election and out of an election. But you try and do what you can to alert people as to what's going on, and hopefully they'll understand. And speaking of trade, we're finding out now that the United States and Egypt are nearing a pact to slash Egypt's debt. And oh yes, by the way, the State Department and the U.S. Chamber of Commerce will take executives from nearly 50 American companies like Caterpillar and Xerox into Egypt to invest in Egypt. So there goes more jobs sucked out of the United States into another country to be imported back into the United States. You know the story with China. That's what happened there. Speaking of telling the truth, For years, we saw the world press telling us that Osama bin Laden, and this is just a photograph of the front page of the Independent newspaper in England, and it's a picture of Osama bin Laden. It says, anti-Soviet warrior, this is after Afghanistan, anti-Soviet warrior puts his army on the road to peace. Isn't that nice and warm and friendly? Osama bin Laden is putting his army on the road to peace. And so this was the kind of thing that they were selling the American people and the world when we had articles on Osama bin Laden telling people what he really was. He's a terrorist. But nobody listened. They listened to the world press, the neocons who had financed and trained Osama bin Laden. There are those who still claim that is going on. There's no definitive proof, but things do look funny from time to time. Speaking of things that look funny, yesterday's New York Times. And I'm not going to mention names because I don't want a flurry of letters coming in. But when the New York Times starts to tout conservative Christian leaders on its front page, let the bells and whistles go off because something is wrong. These neocon so-called Christian leaders have sold us out in the past. I see no indication that they will do otherwise in the future. Another thing, and I'll just wrap this up, I noticed an article in the Wall Street Journal. It says U.S. ally is fired in Afghan shakeup. In other words, Karzai, the head of Afghanistan, fired some of his governors out in the provinces, and everybody's shook up over it, including retired U.S. Army Lieutenant General David Barno, former coalition commander in Afghanistan, in other words, the former commander of NATO over all the troops in Afghanistan, who serves as a senior fellow at the Center for a New American Security in Washington, D.C. Well, I thought, that sounds familiar, and it was when I went online to look at it. It was started by 2 members of the Council on Foreign Relations. The majority of its board members, they've got 15 board members, 10 of them are members of the Council on Foreign Relations. One who is not a member is a member of the Trilateral Commission, as are 2 others. But this is the kind of thing that goes on, is that the Council on Foreign Relations has a great amount of influence in regard to our foreign policy through organizations such as this, through retired generals who we think are serving American constitutional foreign initiatives. They're not. CFR members have an agenda, most of them, at least the organization does, and you cannot escape the fact that when you go online, when you read their magazine, you look at the history of the Council on Foreign Relations, it was started by people who want a one-world government under socialism. That has not changed since it was founded in 1921. The armed forces of the United States have the image of the lower-level officers and non-coms and grunts who are out there serving the people of the United States. These individuals, these men and women, we really support. It's their leadership in the Joint Chiefs of Staff and in other areas that contain members of the Council on Foreign Relations that are not abiding by their oath to the Constitution. They serve a different master. They serve an organization that wants a one-world government under socialism. And we honor them because they wear the uniform, but we should look at their political background, their political things that they stand for. And this is one case in point. The whole commander from the United States in charge of the Afghani and NATO forces, member of the CFR, continuing in the CFR, and advising the administration with an organization that is so overwhelmingly run by the Council on Foreign Relations, it can't possibly serve the foreign policy of the United States. Take a look at the Council on Foreign Relations. If you want to, send for our book that talks about it called Shadows of Power. You can get it at shopjbs.org. And you will find, reading that book, it will open your eyes. It will be a paradigm shift as to what's really going on with United States foreign policy. Till next week, we'll see you then.